And the extraordinary piece of art that clearly is just so powerful and so inspiring was done by Brent and Dia Shandera. Why don't you talk a little about, how it came to be and just the power behind it and the inspiration you had behind it?
Sure. Well, it's titled A Bridge to Love and Peace, and it's about bridging heaven and earth. And so the idea is creating this bridge from earth to heaven, or from where we are today to our future. So if we're moving on this bridge towards the future, these are the kinds of things that we envision are important, to stay in the present moment, moving forward with love, the power of belief, the concept of new beginnings, and the recognition that there are many paths, and you can just see there's just filled with all these different images and messages. You see a bridge here as well, and these over here are some of the different symbols of the world's religions, and so we just had a lot of fun creating this. My beloved partner Dia Shandera and I, and it was just amazing pulling all this together. Took about several months actually to collect the materials for this, and then probably, over a period of several days, we pulled it together, carefully decided what kind of messages we wanted to have, what kind of imagery, and then we went through several different steps along the way of deciding what we wanted and what we didn't want to have, and then of course the whole process of putting it on here and gluing it on there, and so it was really...
Oh, that's beautiful.
We had a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. And so when I was talking at the open about your life, that you had an unusual childhood in a way, and a lot of our guests have had childhood that really motivated them to seek out who they were and who they really were and their kinds. Why don't you talk a little about that?
Well, yeah, my childhood was pretty interesting. My mother was born and raised in Turkey, so she's Muslim. My father is Jewish and Christian, and we were brought up as Christians, Methodists in the Methodist tradition. And he was also interested in meditation and Zen Buddhism and lots of different kind of spiritual traditions. My mother was mostly interested in Islam and was not really sort of dogmatic in that. It was a very deeply spiritual person. So growing up, at times it was kind of confusing to try to figure out what does all this mean? How does all these religious information have some kind of impact on my life? And so throughout my life, I've been in the process of trying to integrate all that information. So, and
what were the big steps in really, propelling you and motivating you to, go deeper, further up and further in, and come to where everything kind of, is the rainbow bridge, is the connection?
Well, the Rainbow Bridge actually kind of started back during the period when I was creating the Park Online Community, which was a business. Started in 1994 and went until 2001. During that period of time, it was extremely challenging. And so during that period of time, I was drawing upon all of the different information and wisdom from the different various faiths. So I was writing it down, taking notes. I didn't realize it was going to be a book. I was using the information to kind of just get through that experience. And so after the park shut down, I had all these notes, and it just literally just came to me through a meditation one day that, wow, this is actually really important wisdom that is the common ground of the world's religions, also known as universal principles. So the idea of creating this book, which puts distills the fundamental pith essence, the heart essence of all the world's major religions, into like the smallest possible book. That was the initial goal of the Rainbow Bridge. So,
wow.
So the first edition, which was published in 2001, it was actually a 3x5 book.
Wow.
So just very small, and again
because the book I got and read was larger than that.
It was larger than that. So the first one was 2001, published in 2001. And I got a lot of really amazing feedback from people saying that they carried it around in their pockets, or they put it in their purse, or they put it on their nightstand and read it every night. And it was spiral bound, so they could leave it open to a certain page and just flip it open and see what message synchronistically appeared. So I got a lot of really positive feedback. So then in 2003, I expanded it and published a second edition in 2003. And that has been now translated into 23 languages. And we've created a prototype board game to introduce people to universal principles. The whole idea is to take these universal principles from the kind of the realm of religion and spirituality and put it into this entertaining game where people can learn about universal principles and how it applies in a concrete manner in our lives. But in the context of a game, entertaining game where you learn about yourself as well as learning about the other people playing the game at the same time. So just coming out with the 3rd edition, and we're very excited to be publishing that soon.
So the board game is already out and exists?
It's a prototype.
Yeah, right. That's what I didn't think it was available.
Yeah, yes, it's not available yet. It's a prototype. I just moved down to Los Angeles from San Francisco Bay Area, and over the past several years I've been playing it and sort of piloting it and getting a lot of positive feedback. So it's another exciting project, another exciting aspect of the Rainbow Bridge.
And we were talking before we got ready to shoot that we both felt like a big new paradigm and a big way to reach literally millions of people in a no time, no space way is the internet and through the social media. And that's one of your big dreams and big projects and big knowledge bases, right? Why don't you talk a lot about that? I mean, I think that would be interesting for people to see how that, all these new technologies and formats in a way are really enlivening the experience of that connection, of that Rainbow Bridge.
So let me just talk briefly about the park. I mentioned the park online community. That was the first deliberately global world community in cyberspace. And that was, it was operating from 1994 until 2001, like I said, and by the time we had to close our doors, unfortunately, we were at 700,000 members. So it was this operation that was pretty much running out of the proverbial garage, but that was a major, major positive experience, incredible for bringing people together around the world. It's actually the 3rd book that I'm in the process of completing, and it's called The Grandfather of Social Networking, The Park Odyssey. And so that was a very exciting project and
was
venture.
It almost the forerunner of the Facebook type things for a specific area, and it was a little ahead of its time? Or?
Very much ahead of its time. And at that time we were calling those online communities. Now they're called social networks. It's really the same thing. You create a platform where people can come together, can communicate with one another through chat rooms or discussion boards or instant messaging systems or private messaging systems. We had a home page system. We had a
was it a Ning?
Ads.
I know there were Nings.
No, Ning was not around at the time. Yeah.
So you were before that?
We were before that, yeah. So that was, definitely like the precursor to today's modern social networking sites. And I've created another one, which is kind of like the next generation, which is called the Earth Communications System. Earth Communications Center, earthcomcenter.com, and it's in alpha state right now. It's a project that's underway. But the vision for the park and the vision for Earth Communications Center was to create a socially responsible alternative to places like AOL and MSN, and today, of course, it would be Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, and there's a whole lot of other different sites as well. So it's an exciting project. And as far as the social networking you wanted me to speak about, so I'm involved in about 40 different social networks, and we were talking during the break about how I'm using those systems. I'm using a custom designed system to broadcast inspiring and uplifting quotations in an automated fashion 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
From your specific social network pages, all 40 of the different varieties?
Correct. Yeah. So what happens is the one system that I've built broadcasts it out into the 40 different networks. And so each of the different networks has a different audience. So LinkedIn, of course, is a professional audience. Facebook is mostly for personal connections. although other connections can be made there as well. And there's a whole variety of other there's many different social networks that are in existence online right now. So it's a whole process of trying to get these messages spread out in the world. So, and on Twitter, for example, I have about 180,000 followers at this point, and feel like I'm still running out of the garage. So
Right,
just getting started.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about this earlier as well, is that, you know, a lot of us are feeling that we're really on the cusp of a recognition of value of light workers and light organizations and artists and musicians and entrepreneurs who are really trying to heal the heart and heal the root. And so far they really haven't been supported, and almost every organization is garage-based at this time, or trying to sell a few CDs of their music, you know, and it's because the society doesn't recognize the value of that heart healing, of that root healing. So it's hard for them to support it. But once the energy gets to a certain point, that will start to be supported, and then, you know, we'll be out of the garage, and we will have, you know, offices full of, you know, staff who are really letting people know about the opportunities that are presented by all these incredible sayings and videos and talks and workshops and music and art.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that more and more people are recognizing it. The flip side of all these terrible catastrophes and crises that are going on is that it's pushing people and almost in a way forcing people to really reevaluate what's going on, what's happening in the world. Do I like what's going on? Is there any way, and is there something I can do about it? And so it's a really, in spite of all the disasters and suffering on a mass scale, it's also incredibly exciting, because this is really, we're going through a birth process. Our species is rapidly evolving. Our consciousness is rapidly expanding, and we're able to recognize bodies of knowledge beyond our own individual ego self. And so the internet is, of course, playing a huge role in expanding individual consciousness and expanding collective consciousness as well. So it's a really exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, we've talked about, you know, Obama wouldn't have happened, Egypt, Libya, you know, without Facebook, without Twitter, without these new mediums, without all the bridging shows being available all over the world, your books being translated and available, you know, to download on YouTube or, you know, whatever, from your website or whatever, ebooks, and, you know, all that is just, you can't stop it. And it's the energy that people are trying to put out of connection and love and oneness, and it really is making an enormous difference in changing everything.
It sure is, it sure is. And there's more and more books coming out, and more amazing films and documentaries that are shifting consciousness literally one person at a time. So it's very exciting, and you know, I have this metaphor of a computer has an operating system, right? A Windows is an operating system, or Macintosh, or Unix. The world that we live in is a completely interconnected system, and it's this big, enormous system without an operating system. And so, if you had a PC or if you had a computer without an operating system, any program could come along and start sucking up all the resources, right? So, using up the CPU power, using up the hard drive space, using up the peripherals and devices or whatnot. And that's what would happen if you didn't have an operating system on the computer. Well, on the global scale, that's, I believe, exactly what we're seeing. We have this incredible, totally interconnected system of systems internationally, and no smoothly functioning global operating system. So it's an incredible opportunity, I think, and the internet and computers in general, information systems, are going to be playing an important role, I think, in the advent, in the ushering in of this whole new age, the golden age, which is already here, actually. It's like there's these two different realities that are coexisting at the same time. The reality of, you know, the war and violence and poverty and fear-based thinking and ways of being. At the same time, you know, this whole reality of love and connectedness and oneness and principles of, you know, using collaboration and partnership. and dialogue to resolve our problems and things like that. So we've got these two realities taking place right now at the same time, and one of them is kind of dying out, slowly crumbling under its own weight, and the new system is, and the new age, new era, is in the process of being birthed.
It's birthing new ideas and new paradigms and new ways of doing it. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So, and I think everyone is the conduit. We are each conduits of that energy running through us. The energy of love and compassion and wisdom and partnership and collaboration and peace and harmony. And that is our future. And so the Rainbow Bridge is about creating a bridge to this future, to the future that is our destiny, the future of peace and harmony and collaboration. And through the miracle of the internet, it's all possible. And the internet is here, and it's all slowly happening. So it's just incredibly exciting time to be here on the planet.
And your skill set, I mean, so many of us have so many different skill sets over the years, and now we're all kind of putting them together in collaboration to serve the love. But you had a background in almost the beginning of the internet and program languages. So I mean, you almost go back to the root, and are now seeing the real progress in really serving that consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember when I first learned about the internet. It was literally like a million light bulbs went off in terms of, wow, what is the potential that it has for bringing people together around the world. So
right away you sensed that immediately, that the fact that there was no time and space, and you didn't know when people were looking at it, and it was available in somewhere in every city and
all around the world. Yeah, I remember I was actually, after I had this recognition, I was asked to speak. At the time I was working at General Electric in San Francisco, GE Information Services, and I remember after I found out about this and the light bulbs went off, I was giving demonstrations to people, and I would say, so here's this what's called a home page, and now where is this located? You don't even know where it's located. Well, it happens to be located in Australia. Well, if I click on this link over here, and then I would click, and then there would be some other page, and I'd say, this one is coming from Japan. You didn't even need to know that came from Japan. So yeah, so when the light bulbs went off, and it was just this incredible.
So you really knew it from the very beginning that, unless something stopped, that this had enormous potential.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I understood all the intricacies and pieces, but certainly I saw like the huge potential. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe we'll talk about that in a second. Why don't you talk a little bit about, I know that light bulbs are going off in your head all the time just because you love all this stuff and you love to do it. Where do you see all this stuff going, and how it's going to really serve the love and the light?
The Rainbow Bridge?
The Rainbow Bridge, the internet, anything that's happening now. I mean, I know you're really on the cusp of all these kind of new things.
Well, thank you. In terms of the Rainbow Bridge, I see the Rainbow Bridge in terms of being the common ground in the world's religions, being these universal principles that transcend and yet also include and honor each of the world's religions, right? So I see that these universal principles as being very, very important in terms of creating this future that we want to create with one another. And so as we stand and walk across this bridge to the future, as we do that, we can use these universal principles as our common ground. So I think that is extremely important. We've got we're working on a series of books actually to take the universal principles and to explain how they can be applied in very concrete and practical ways. So the first book in the series is The Rainbow Bridge in Business, for example. So the Rainbow Bridge in Business will talk about how do you use these universal principles in business and commerce. Again, in very concrete, simple, and practical ways. And some other books in this series will be, for example, The Rainbow Bridge in Media, The Rainbow Bridge in Education, The Rainbow Bridge in Law, The Rainbow Bridge in Government, and the Rainbow Bridge in Science, and there's a whole other series in the works as well. We're also starting to work on the children's series, so the Rainbow Bridge children's, and there'll be like one for very young children, and then another one for children that are a little bit older. But we see that one of the things about the Rainbow Bridge and the universal principles in general is that the magic is they're very simple. These principles are so
Why don't you
simple.
talk to them? I mean, we've mentioned the universal principles a lot. Why don't you speak of a few? Just give a
Well,
feel
for
them.
example, sure. So, for example, just some of them off the top of my head would be like love and compassion and wisdom and persistence and the power of our thinking, the power of our thoughts, the fact that whatever we focus on, we will manifest. So if we're, for example, in the midst of moving from this old system that doesn't really serve all of humanity in the best way it can to a world that works for all, so what we have to do is use our minds and our brains and all of our full conscious intentionality to focus on what we want. Not to be thinking about what we don't want and all the terrible things that are going on, but to deliberately focus on what do we want the new future to look like. So that's another, those are a couple examples of universal principles. And there's 59 different principles that are described in the Rainbow Bridge. So those are some examples.
And so the plan is to show how these principles will, if someone's experienced them, will affect every aspect of their lives.
Yes, so the first book, The Rainbow Bridge, it basically talks about these universal principles. And then, as I said, we have this other series which will go into more detail, and so that people can then understand how to apply these in the field of government, for example. When we talk about a world that doesn't have a uniform, smoothly functioning operating system, that'll be really important to have the Rainbow Bridge in government or the Rainbow Bridge in governance.
I mean, is there a specific set of ways that it would, in your formulation of, because these haven't really manifested yet, are you saying that these principles and the books will lead people to exactly ways of dealing with it, or will it? See, because I mean, the reason I bring this up is because a lot of people ask me, what should I do about this or that, or how should this go? Yeah. And I'd say if we can bring love and consciousness to it, you know, that will end up doing that. But I don't have ways of doing it. Does your book set out ways of how this love and consciousness will actually manifest in these specific areas?
That's what the purpose of these additional books will be. So, for example, the Rainbow Bridge in Business, it'll be all about how do you take these 59 universal principles and consciously use them in the world of business and commerce. So, but it's not really a cookbook or a recipe book either. It's more of a framework. It's more of a way of pulling the wisdom from all the great world traditions and then putting it together into something called universal principles. And so in the process, it sort of moves away from religion as kind of dogmatic religions
just
to people and
right.
spirituality.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, give some examples. Okay, so for business, now you have these 59, beautiful universal principles, and business, which has been, busyness and money and greed, and to a large extent, and not, as I said at the opening service. So, how do we walk through that in this, say, first book?
Sure. So, for example, one of the things that's already happening in business is the business world is being transformed already. So, things like socially responsible business, or conscious capitalism, or the triple bottom line. So, the concept that a business shouldn't be operating simply on a financial bottom line, but should be operating on the principles of financial success, but also social equity and environmental protection. So, that's an example of how the business world is already transforming. So in a sense, we kind of, are moving, the business is already being transformed, but if we take these universal principles and consciously apply them, then we can use it in a way where people can become even more conscious. So some examples would be, how do you treat your employees? So in terms of the performance appraisal process, where does the concept of patience fit in? And the concept of communication and the concept of persistence. This is the book hasn't been written yet, so I can't really.
Right, it's hard to say exactly what it says.
Eloquently
right.
describe
No, I know
it,
you're a debater, but I know that you love these kind of ideas and helping the new paradigms being built. I mean, when I, saw your bio and saw your stuff, it was like that was, you know, life's work, like we were talking on an earlier show. That was a real service that, you felt a real part of building the new paradigms on the bridge. And we talk about that a lot on the show, that, that's the time we're in. We're kind of in between bridging it. We're on the bridge between heaven and earth now.
Exactly.
And it's tricky. And, it is tricky. And, to go from all these things and to come into that balance and that harmony again. We need all the help we can get. And I really, when I read your stuff, it was like, oh, well, that's what he wants help to do. And I thought, well, we really need it there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it's very, very needed. The good thing about these universal principles is that they are simple. Not necessarily easy, but simple. So that, to me, is a real strong guiding light. And in terms of being guided or led by our ideals, that's another kind of concept that I think it's really important for the times in which we live. The Rainbow Bridge, we're also talking about kind of like the world outside of ourselves and transforming our society. Another really important aspect about it, though, is like how do these universal principles help within yourself to find your own center, to find your own peace and harmony within yourself, because ultimately that's really...
Yeah, you're not going to change anything if you're not changing.
Yeah, if you're in inner turmoil and experiencing all sorts of things going on inside yourself and you're trying to help, change the world, you may end up, introducing a lot more problems in the world. So the whole idea that the world is around us is a manifestation of what's going on inside of ourselves. So that's another aspect, of course, of how it works.
And you say that you see a lot of this new paradigms in business already, because I'm not really clear on how prevalent it is, but you're more involved in it. So tell me more. Tell me more about that. You do see the new businesses forming and people bringing more and more consciousness to it?
Yes, absolutely.
100% you see it.
Well,
not 100% in business, but definitely there's a big shift in that.
I would say there's absolutely, without any question, a shift is taking place. Now, can that shift take place faster? Is it going fast enough? I'd like it to be going faster than it is, but I'd like to just focus on the fact that it is happening, positive change is taking place. I received an email message a few weeks ago about what they're calling B corporations being formed in the state of California, whereas they're already legalized in other states. And basically a B corporation is a kind of it's what I was mentioning before, a socially responsible business that's operating not just under the single bottom line of financial success, but under a whole other set of socially responsible factors, or conscious capitalism is another way of describing it. And another way of seeing and knowing that
would that be a separate, like, legal entity?
Yes. And the reason why
somewhere in between, like, a regular corporation and a nonprofit?
Exactly.
Because I never heard of it, interestingly enough. So talk a little bit more about that.
Sure.
That'd be interesting.
Well, I'm not an expert on B corporations, but just in general, what it is let's say you have a corporation that is, legally speaking, it only runs under the financial bottom line. Right, so if you have all these investors and other stakeholders, even if you want to make a positive difference, you're being restricted by the way the corporate papers are all put together. So it becomes actually very difficult to really make a difference in how the business works. But the B corporations will function in a different way. So it'll be clear right from the start. Right, it'd be clear legally.
This is the intention, that in the bylaws, in the articles of incorporation, that the intention is actually try to do the right thing.
Exactly.
To be good.
Exactly.
Not be bad.
Right.
That's the B corporation. Be good.
But that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's incredible when you think about it, because now that's actually taking place in, as I said, many states.
So in other words, it would be a for-profit corporation, but with the intention of not being so bad, be good.
Yeah, well, it's a for-profit corporation where, in the bylaws and in the articles of incorporation and all the other paperwork, etc., it'll actually say things like social responsibility,
justice and fairness to the employees,
and to the communities that are served, to your customers, transparency, and as well as protection of the environment, that that it's not acceptable is to, for example, just pollute,
toxic,
and just do things that can in the past maybe be ignored or pushed under the carpet. It'll actually be part of the corporate structure. So those are some examples, and I just see that as being incredibly exciting.
And
so,
you say they're legal entities in a number of states now?
Already, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm behind the curve on this
Yeah.
one, I'll tell you that. That's funny because I went to the Wharton School back in the day, so, I mean, business and, actually, I'm a lawyer in the state of Maryland. They couldn't disbar me after they see this show, but but it's interesting because, these are things that, I knew that you would know a lot about them. And it's interesting because we do need different systems. I mean, at some point when consciousness reaches a certain level, I mean, all the rules don't really matter. But on the bridge, I think we need, certain, kind of like signposts and things.
I think, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, and these signposts, as you're referring to them, these are things that we can look at and be inspired by, and say, wow, this is actually happening. Another example of how the shift is taking place is that there's a whole lot of socially responsible investment firms that actually say, we're only going to invest in companies that fit all of the following criteria, and financial success is only one of them. That's huge. I mean, that's groundbreaking. So change is afoot. It's already happening, and the Rainbow Bridge and the universal principles and creating this bridge to the future, the whole intention is to facilitate that process, to accelerate it, to expedite it. Because, of course, in the world that we live in today with some 16,000 children starving to death every single day, it's horrifying.
It's incomprehensible.
It's horrifying.
With all the assets and all the food on the planet.
Yeah. Exactly.
I always, this thing I say is that, where there's a will, there's a way. But when a country wants to build a whole army base in the middle of the desert, literally in a weekend, they can do it. But to get water to people who don't have fresh water in a month, you can't do it. We don't have the resources for it. I mean, it's so absurd on some level. Because the will isn't there, the understanding of the value isn't there. People don't feel like these people are their brothers and sisters, so it's not, the connection is just a little off at this point.
It is. And even though we have the power of the internet, it hasn't quite yet been architected in a way that allows the people to come together in a peaceful way and have an evolution.
I think the intention of, like, Obama was that,
absolutely.
that really galvanized a lot of people, but it's hard. I mean, it's like turning a big ship around.
Exactly. It's like an ocean liner. You want to take a turn, it takes a while to make that.
It takes a lot of ocean.
Yeah.
So in like 30 seconds, what would you want everybody to know about the Rainbow Bridge, about their potential, about, whatever you think would be beautiful for people to know now?
Well, I guess, number one, it's a really important, exciting time to be alive. Every single person makes a difference. Look within to see, are you happy with who you are? Are you happy with the way your life is working and the way you're living your life? And are you excited to be part of the change that's taking place, the transformation of the world into a world that works for all? Are you part of the system that's sort of dying out, or part of the new system? And so the universal principles are so simple, and hopefully it's our intention, of course, that the Rainbow Bridge will make an important contribution in this whole transition period that's taking place.
Amen, brother. That's beautiful. So we hope so too. We hope that there are a lot of new things coming out that really propel us. So if anybody wants any information, Alan, 805-687-2053, Brent, the Rainbow Bridge, the Art Project, the artists, the musicians. We love you. Good night. God bless you. Thank you for coming. Good night.
Time